All hands man your battle stations.
Broadcasting live on the UnitedWest.org AM radio network and simulcasting on DirecTV, iHeartRadio, Roku, and the World Wide Web, this is Enemies of the State with Tom Trento.
Okay, here we are, day two of our five-part series on apocalyptic Iran, good deal or bad deal. And everyone knows, as you're tuning into WSBR Radio 740 on your dial on June 23rd, Tuesday, June 23rd, 2015. Though we taped this show yesterday, Monday the 22nd, and we'll tell you why in a little bit. Tom Trento, your host here. Name of the show, Enemies of the State. We're looking at, indeed, a state enemy, the Republic of Iran, and all that entails. Yesterday, we had Dr. Matthew Koenig on from Georgetown. He essentially said that he believes it's going to be a bad deal, and the June 30th deadline, which is a week from air date, June 23rd, is going to get extended. It's not going to be done. Probably going to take another month or two, so sometime deeply into the summer, the deal will be done, and it's going to be a bad deal for the United States because all of the red lines that the United States had established at the outset some 13 years ago have been turned pink and then evaporated by the negotiating skill of the Persians. And today we have a special guest with us, Dr. Peter Pry. And Dr. Peter Pry is one of the world's experts on a unique area of nuclear fission, nuclear capability, that area that deals with electromagnetic pulses, what these things are, and when they're all gathered up in a little bag and thrown at somebody's country, what they can do to that country. And we're going to look as to whether or not the deal that is forthcoming by the Obama administration with Iran can lead to an accelerated EMP capability by Iran, and what the implications of that are to the United States, to the free world, to the West, and indeed to Israel. This is serious stuff, folks. All week we're staying on Iran as a prelude. Now, there's a fail-safe device established by the United States Congress. They have a capability to weigh in and shut down the president's decision. Only the president has a capability to override the United States Congress's view and to maintain the deal that he wants to get. So a lot of stuff going on, and we understand, believe me, we here at the United West understand the complexity of this and the oft behavior of regular Americans who go, man, this is too crazy, nuclear bombs, EMPs, Iran. I'm trying to put bread on the table and feed my family. How am I going to have anything to do with all this big stuff? But we're trying to draw the connection between the big stuff affecting your life on an everyday basis so that you can continue to put bread on your table for your family. All of this is related. We can't hide from it, certainly not at this advanced cyber-technical age in which we live. Dr. Peter Pry, our dear friend, good to have you back on the show. We did some work a couple of years ago, and you work regularly with all of our friends over at Center for Security Policy and many others that you're working on in Washington. How are you, sir?
Oh, as well as can be expected, given the existential threat we face from Iran, North Korea, Russia, China. It's a very depressing time to be alive as an American when I see my grandchildren playing, and I know that I'm bequeathing to them an America that is probably no longer going to be a superpower in their lifetimes. And who knows what the future of freedom will be. As Ronald Reagan warned us, freedom depends on every generation. You can lose it in one generation. And indeed, with something like a nuclear Iran, not only could we lose our freedom, we could lose our lives with just a single nuclear weapon because of the EMP threat that you referred to earlier.
Peter, we're taping this show on the 22nd, Monday the 22nd, which is the anniversary of a very infamous operation, Operation Barbarossa in World War II. And you're sitting in front of something very interesting. Explain what you're sitting in front of, and Operation Barbarossa. Somehow bring those two things together and give us a message today as we start our show.
Well, I'll start with Operation Barbarossa first, which is certainly an anniversary of despair. You know, it was one of the most tragic and horrific events in human history when Hitler decided to move east and launched World War II against the Soviet Union, you know, which ended up killing 20, 30 million Russians and escalated the war into the disaster that it became, where eventually 60 million people ended up losing their lives. And that is what the anniversary of June 22nd is today from a negative point of view. So in a way, it's symbolically appropriate for us to be talking about what could be an equally calamitous decision, you know, event. We're talking about the possibility of this nuclear deal with Iran going forward.
Hey, if that's President Obama who needs your advice, take the call, no problem.
I think it unlikely. Yeah, the painting behind me is a optimistic part of our history. It's my own painting. I did it myself. It depicts the battle between the USS Constellation and the French frigate L'Insurgent in 1799. After the United States won its independence from Great Britain, we had a quasi-war with France, and this was the first victory of the now independent U.S. Navy over a foreign adversary, and it electrified the country at the time. People, you know, electrified people's patriotism and the fact that the United States Navy could defeat a power like France. And this painting, which I call Sunlit Glory, you know, basically is the dawn of the U.S. Navy coming onto the stage as a force for world freedom, and which is what it is today, or has been up until this president.
Yeah, a very interesting juxtaposition, folks. The Operation Barbarossa 74 years ago, 22nd, 1941, June, where Hitler launched the largest invasive force ever, something like 4 million people, into the Soviet Union, and as Peter said, millions and millions and millions destroyed. Just a stupid move militarily, and that's what we're seeing politically and militarily. That's what we're on the horizon of that, possibly with this bad Iranian deal. And then the painting that you did, that's pretty amazing artwork, Peter, but the past glory and unique capabilities of the United States, and whether or not these two dynamics, whether we're on the verge of seriously bad decisions that bring the darkness into the United States, and not just metaphorical darkness, but EMP darkness, remains to be seen. But good folks like you and others you're working with, and us here, trying to alert Americans to this. One of the beauties of our show, Peter, is that we have the time to get into the issues a little more substantively. And our viewers and listeners love to know about our subject matter experts. So take a moment or so and give us your background. Why should anybody continue to listen on the radio to Peter Pry or keep watching this about Iran's nuclear situation?
Well, before I talk about myself, I can't resist commenting on the diagram you had up of Operation Barbarossa that showed Hitler's move east, its invasion of the Soviet Union. Because today, actually, the lines are going in the other direction. You know, where Russia has invaded Ukraine, and in their military exercises, they regularly deliver like 150,000 troops to the door of the Baltic states, which are now part of NATO. I mean, that's more troops than the Baltic states have in their entire army. So those lines of aggression are actually, both in their exercises and in terms of forces on the ground, are actually moving from east to west now. But that's another topic. On my own background, I used to work for the CIA. I was their expert on nuclear weapons strategy and military doctrine and nuclear operations for the Soviet Union and then later Russia after the Soviet Union collapsed. I was there during the height of the Cold War, through the collapse of the Soviet Union and then the emergence of Russia. And I worked on nuclear weapons and strategy for the CIA during those years from 1985 till 1995. And I was also their expert on electromagnetic-pulse nuclear EMP attack. Then I went to work for the House Armed Services Committee as professional staff, working for all 60 members of the House Armed Services Committee as an expert on nuclear weapons, strategy, terrorism, NATO enlargement, and again on EMP. Then I served for almost a decade on the Congressional EMP Commission, where we were investigating the threat from EMP attack and also the EMP threat from the sun, because this can also be caused by Mother Nature. And today I'm the executive director of the EMP Task Force on National and Homeland Security, which is a congressional advisory board. And we are hoping to try to find accelerated ways to protect our nation, our electrical grid, and our other critical infrastructures from the existential threat that is EMP, which unfortunately, despite all the efforts of the EMP Commission and the Congress over the past decade to educate people about it, it's amazing how few people understand that EMP is not science fiction, that it is a real threat, and indeed it is why Iran wants the bomb and why North Korea has the bomb.
At 17 minutes after, ladies and gentlemen, on the 23rd of June, Tuesday, 2015, you're listening to Dr. Peter Pry with a very unique background through the agency, the analytical work, then in the U.S. Congress, and now overseeing all of this. Tom Trento, your host, Enemies of the State, WSBR Radio. W Sunny Boca Raton Radio, 740 AM on your dial. That's where we can be found on commercial radio. We're also on redstatetalkradio.com. That's internet radio, midnight East Coast time, redstatetalkradio.com. Studio B, we're on the Studio B side for all you night owls out there. Anytime, anywhere on theunitedwest.org. You can watch the show. We produce a 1-hour television show every day. Also on teapartycommunity.com. Parts of our shows go up on Breitbart TV. Peter, our audience, because many of them are in their automobiles driving all around South Florida, they get to the store, they got to get out. And before the first crew gets out of their car, is it fact or fiction, that a relatively small nuclear bomb exploded high up in the atmosphere could indeed wipe out the electronics of a sophisticated first world country?
Yes, absolutely. That was one of the core findings of the Congressional EMP Commission. It's a myth that we've been trying to correct for years, that you need a high-yield, sophisticated nuclear weapon in order to do an EMP attack. In fact, any nuclear weapon will do. They all produce gamma rays, they all produce fireballs, and the gamma rays and fireballs are what generates the nuclear EMP. And I would add, we're talking about high-altitude EMP. So you're talking about detonating the weapon above 30 kilometers. The iconic attack would be at an altitude of about 300 kilometers over the geographic center of the U.S. At those kinds of altitudes, you wouldn't hear the explosion. There'd be no blast on the ground. There'd be no fallout. You might not even know that the nuclear explosion had occurred. On a cloudy day, you might not even see anything. But the one thing that would be produced would be this electromagnetic pulse, which is a super energetic radio wave. It's got so much energy in it that it would destroy electronics and collapse electric grids, and all the critical infrastructures depend upon electricity directly or indirectly. So within about 72 hours, all the electric grids would collapse. All of the critical infrastructures would collapse. You'd have the immediate failure of the electric grid and plunge everything into blackout. And this would not be, and this could be, for example, over the scenario where the bomb is detonated at 300 kilometers, the EMP field would be over all 48 contiguous United States. So with a single bomb, such as terrorists could come up with or steal, or that Iran could develop, a first-generation Hiroshima-Nagasaki type bomb, or something even more primitive than that, would be able to take our whole country out, our whole civilization out. And you don't even need to do the more sophisticated attack, the 300 kilometer altitude. If you did it at 30 kilometers, anywhere over the eastern seaboard, you could do this. You can get above 30 kilometers. You don't even need a missile, but you could do it with a Scud missile launched off a freighter. And we've seen North Korea and Iran practice that. They've actually practiced that, demonstrated the capability to launch a short-range missile off a freighter. But you could also do it with any kind of a jet aircraft or commercial jet aircraft. A small passenger jet aircraft could do a zoom climb that would get you above 30 kilometers, or even a meteorological balloon. There are high-lift meteorological balloons that can get a bomb above 30 kilometers. And at 30 kilometers altitude, the EMP field will have a 600-kilometer radius. And it would take out the eastern grid of the United States, which is where most of our population lives, and 75% of our electricity is generated by the eastern grid. Even if the western grid and Texas remained intact, it would destroy us as a civilization, because we can't survive without 75% of our electricity. This wouldn't be a temporary blackout. We're talking about months or probably years, because it would destroy the extra high voltage transformers and millions of SCADA systems. Excuse me. And it would take years to recover from this, if recovery is possible at all. It might not be possible to recover, because the EMP Commission on which I served estimated that given a nationwide blackout that lasts 1 year, we could lose up to 9 of 10 Americans to starvation, disease, and societal collapse.
Hold on, you said 9 of 10?
I'm recovering from
9 out of 10, yeah. Well, let me get my wits about me here, Peter Pry. I was having a nice day until you start laying all that stuff out. Then, from what you just said, 300 kilometers is what? 6 times 3, 18, 180, 200 miles up in the atmosphere. A small, Hiroshima size, what was that, 150 kiloton warhead?
That was 10 kilotons. The Hiroshima bomb was 10 kilotons.
10. So something relatively small as weapons go at that high altitude. And very few countries have the capability to put something over us that high. Does Iran have that capability now?
Iran does have that capability.
They do.
And so does North Korea. North Korea, back in the most severe nuclear crisis we had with North Korea, in 2013, in the aftermath of their third illegal nuclear test, you may recall Kim Jong-un was threatening to make nuclear missile strikes against the United States and our allies. And in the midst of this most serious nuclear crisis, that even President Obama took very seriously, he actually beefed up our national missile defenses. And we were flying B-2 bombers along the demilitarized zone to try to deter North Korea. They orbited a satellite. It's called the KSM-3 satellite. They put it over on a south polar trajectory, and it came up and passed over the center of the United States at the optimum altitude, and optimum trajectory to both evade our early warning radars and evade our national missile defenses, because we have no radars and no national missile defenses facing south. This technique was invented by the Soviet Union during the Cold War to make a surprise nuclear EMP attack. And I think they probably learned this from the Russians. But they simulated doing exactly that and demonstrated that they could put a satellite over this country at the optimum altitude to put an EMP field over all 48 United States that evades our national missile defenses and our early warning capabilities. And the North Koreans, who are strategic partners with Iran, and have a treaty by which they exchange military and scientific technology, there are North Koreans working in the Iranian so-called space program, okay? And whereas North Korea has demonstrated this capability once, Iran has demonstrated it 4 times. They have 4 times put satellites into south polar orbits on the optimum altitudes for doing the classic, iconic EMP attack against the United States.
All right, Peter, let me get a handle on this thing. Can a satellite hold a weapon, a nuclear weapon? Can you put one inside a satellite?
You could put one inside a satellite. That was part of the Soviet plan. It was a secret weapon that they came up with during the Cold War called the Fractional Orbital Bombardment System. And the idea was you use a space launch vehicle. It looks like a peaceful space launch vehicle, and it looks like it's orbiting a peaceful satellite for weather purposes or communications or something. But inside that is a nuclear warhead. And the idea here is that you launch it to the south, so it's going away from the United States. You know, it doesn't look threatening. And you're not putting it on the classic ballistic trajectory. There's this arcing ballistic trajectory that if it's going to be a standard EMP attack, you do that ballistic trajectory for accuracy, so you can get as close as possible to a missile silo or an Air Force base. But the EMP attack doesn't require accuracy, so you can put it on this satellite orbital type thing that is not a very accurate type orbit. And again, NORAD would not interpret that as a threatening. It looks like, again, a peaceful type trajectory that is normally used by civil, commercial, or non-military satellites. And then you fly the thing over the South Pole. So it goes over the South Pole, comes up the other side, and approaches us from the south, where we're blind. We're completely blind. In fact, even our defense program satellites wouldn't see it. After the third stage flares out over the Philippines, in the case of North Korea, you lose track of what's coming at you. So from the Philippines all the way over to the other side, we would have no clue of this thing coming at us. And but yes, you could hide this thing in a satellite. You probably wouldn't even have to hide it in a satellite if you did it on the first orbit, you know, because we wouldn't be able to see it, and it could just be a warhead. But why not put it inside something that looks like a satellite? The truth is, I mean, I'm sure the administration will vehemently deny it, but the KSM-3 continues to orbit over us. It continues to orbit over us ever since that thing that passes over both the center of our country, that you put up the trajectory, you put up that pattern, it continues to fly over the United States on a regular basis. And we don't have any idea, you know, whether that thing, I can't get into sources and methods, of course, you know, but let's just suffice it to say that, you know, we have no way of independently verifying, unless you inspect that satellite before it's launched. You have no way of independently verifying whether that thing has got a nuclear weapon in it or not.
Wow. All right, Peter, you've just laid out at 28 minutes after the hour. It's 28 minutes after 4 o'clock, folks, on not a real happy day here at Enemies of the State. But again, we're not in the business of providing happy news. We're in the business of providing realistic information upon which public policy can be made that protects Americans, the West, Israel. Peter Pry, expert in these areas, has just laid out that the scientific technology exists for other nations to create an EMP, electromagnetic-pulse bomb, essentially a very sophisticated weapon, an unsophisticated nuclear weapon, get it into the atmosphere at a certain altitude, and detonate it, and cause all kinds of trouble in wherever it's detonated over that area. All of this exists. Before we get into some of the particulars as to how that actually happens, and if one exploded 200 miles above my head right now, how long before my computer would go blank, and what would happen to my body? I have those questions for you, and the guys in the booth have some questions too. Why in the world would anyone in their right mind do this to the United States, knowing that we have a divested response capability? You could wipe out the country, but we have weapons elsewhere that can be deployed to destroy whoever did this to us. Why would anybody even think about doing this?
Before I get to that question, just let me complete describing the threat a little bit.
Okay, yeah, let's do it.
Because we've made the point that any nuclear weapon could be used to do this. But you also mentioned sophisticated nuclear weapons. And I do want to address that. Because there are sophisticated nuclear weapons that are specially designed just to create EMP. The Russians call them super EMP weapons. And we know that Russia and China have them. And North Korea also has them. They probably got these from the Russians. When I was on the Congressional Emp Commission, we had the highly unusual experience of being demarched by 2 Russian generals who were their foremost experts on EMP. And they warned us that there had been brain drain and technology transfer from Russia to North Korea. This was in 2004, before North Korea had tested any nuclear weapons. And they said in a few years, North Korea would be able to build a super EMP weapon. And that super EMP weapon is exactly the kind of thing that you could put in a satellite, because it's very small, it has a really low yield. In fact, it has exactly the yield that the North Korean weapons have, about less than 10 kilotons. It's about 3 kilotons. A possible design, we can't get into the actual design of these things, but roughly speaking, the design for a neutron bomb, more accurately called an enhanced radiation warhead, like the W-84 that we used to have that could be delivered by a nuclear artillery round during the Cold War, produces not just neutron radiation, but it produces gamma rays. Produces all kinds of radiation, including gamma rays. It's an enhanced gamma ray type weapon. And something like that, souped up, is basically what a super EMP weapon could look like. And that is so small, you could actually, one man, it weighs less than 100 kilograms. And something like that could be hidden within the North Korean KSM-3 satellite. The South Korean military intelligence, independently of the EMP Commission, also concluded that North Korea has got the super. And a Chinese military spokesman a couple of years ago said that they have the super. And the bombs, all 3 tests, it looks like the super. It's a low-yield bomb, that produces a seismic signal that's probably the gammas coming out. And whatever this design is, the North Koreans are very happy with it because they've deployed it on their missiles. Now, going to the other question that you had, very important question, because this is one of the other things people take false comfort from, which is, well, we managed to deter the Soviet Union all through the Cold War through mutual assured destruction. And won't that work out? Won't that work against countries like North Korea and Iran? Well, first of all, assured destruction actually didn't work all that well, as people might think. I wrote a book called War Scare, Russia and America on the Nuclear Brink, that lays out a number of nuclear close calls we had during the Cold War, where we almost went over that threshold and got into nuclear war with first the Soviet Union and then Russia after the Cold War. And these events most people only know about the Cuban Missile Crisis, but there have been a number of nuclear close calls with Russia. And in fact, the most dangerous incident was probably after the Cold War, under Boris Yeltsin, the most benign leader of Russia, who wanted to be a strategic partner with the United States. There was this incident on the 25th of January, 1995, where the Norwegians launched a meteorological rocket. And due to a clerical error, the ballistic missile launch notification was never passed to the Russian General Staff. The error was on the Russian side. The guy who was supposed to do this was new at the job, and he didn't know he was supposed to give the notification to the General Staff. And the whole incident only lasted 20 minutes, but it's the only time in history that all 3 Chegets, that's the Russian equivalent of the nuclear football, there are 3 guys, any one of whom can launch a nuclear strike on the United States in Russia. The President, the Chief of the General Staff, and the Defense Minister. At the time, that was Grachev, who was the Defense Minister, and General Kolesnikov was the Chief of the General Staff. And both of these guys were yelling at Yeltsin to push the button.
Wow.
They could have done it on their own. Fortunately, Yeltsin was a strong enough character that they were willing to exercise restraint for 20 minutes. And then they saw that the missile continued on its trajectory. They didn't have this EMP burst. That's what they thought it was. They thought it was an EMP attack coming in on them. But anyway, the fact of the matter is, we just got lucky during the Cold War. Assured destruction is going to fail someday. But it's not something you would want to bank your grandchildren's lives on, because it nearly failed many times during the Cold War. Now, that aside, when you're dealing with countries like Iran, it's a completely different situation, than the Soviet Union. One of the things that made the Soviets such bad guys, were they were officially atheists, right? They didn't believe there was an afterlife. There was only this life. And fortunately, we had guys like Leonid Brezhnev, who were also, very much into their dachas and masseuses and enjoyed being among the elites. So they didn't want to die. And that was a factor that that helped make assured destruction work during the Cold War. That is not the case with the Iranian mullahs. You know, the reason they want the bomb does not have to do with the normal geostrategic, geopolitical calculations that the United States is used to from the Cold War period in terms of thinking about the behaviors of normal nation states. They don't care about the future of Iran, the existence of the Iranian people. You know, they are, in their ideology, they believe we are in the end time. And they want to check all the boxes, you know, to bring back their 12th Imam and realize not just the worldwide triumph of Islam as an ideology on this earth, but the spiritual triumph of Islam in the universe after and beyond this earth. As far as the mullahs are concerned, their country is a giant truck bomb. I mean, these are not people that are willing to send their own children, you know, to their deaths to advance this Islamic eschatological vision. You know, during the war with Iraq, they would send children out to clear minefields armed with nothing but the Quran, and they're okay with that. You know, so their mindset is completely different, and it's not deterrable the way the Soviets were. So if these guys get the bomb, they're much more likely to use it. What about North Korea? I've heard also people say, well, the North Koreans are officially an atheist society too, and therefore aren't we protected by, you know, by their love affair with life, for example? Well, I don't think we are. I think in many respects North Korea is actually just as dangerous as Iran is. And for this reason, first of all, despite the fact that they're officially an atheistic country, they actually in practice are not. They actually do believe in God, and their God is Kim Jong-un. If you look at the way their media, their whole society is set up to deify, we joke about, we laugh at these things that their media talks about Kim Jong-un golfing a perfect golf game, and Kim Jong-un inventing the internet, and all these extraordinary, ridiculous-sounding things. But what they're doing is deifying the guy, trying to convince their own people that this guy basically is a god or a demigod, you know, that he was supposed to.
Oh, we seem to have lost Peter there.
Yeah, we
for a
lost
second.
him there.
We'll get him back. Wow, fascinating stuff. I got a million questions. You guys have some questions.
Yep.
We're going to get Peter Pry, Dr. Peter Pry back on. Tom Trento here. It's Tuesday afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Another beautiful Florida day. 4:38, 4 minutes, 4 hours, and 38 minutes after 12 o'clock East Coast time, 4:38. Hope you're having a wonderful week. All week, our title, Apocalyptic Iran, : good deal or bad deal, ? Rhetorical question. The answer is we're going to get a bad deal. We know that. We got Peter back on. He's a good deal. Peter, the North Koreans did not like what you were saying. They zapped a little thing right down to your computer, but we got you back.
No doubt, no doubt. Well, just think about this, about Kim Jong-un and the problem when a society and a leader starts trying to sell himself as a god or a demigod. We know from history that these guys start believing it themselves. And that can make them as dangerous as the Iranians. Because, as Jefferson said, you know, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And part of the reason he said that is, you know, the founders looked back to Roman history, and they saw how absolute power in the hands of a Roman leader like Caligula, for example. You know, we all know who Caligula is. Most Americans don't know who the leaders of Rome were, but we know about Caligula because he was such a corrupt, evil character, such a violent character, and yet he was only in power for 3.5 years. And that so corrupted him and made him so evil that we remember him to this day, almost 2,000 years later. Now, what about Kim Jong-un? How long has he had absolute power? You know, Kim Jong-un's grandfather had absolute power, and his father had absolute power, and now Kim Jong-un has absolute power. Kim Jong-un is Caligula in the 3rd generation.
Wow.
Think about that.
Yeah.
Caligula in the 3rd generation, armed with nuclear missiles and capable of doing an EMP attack against us right now. How much confidence can you have, you know, that this guy isn't going to just get out of the wrong side of the bed in the morning and decide that he's going to attack us? He is so paranoid that he kills close relatives who, up until he actually killed them, most people assumed he might have even been fond of them. He just recently, this year, executed his uncle. Had him shot apart by an and we don't know why. He's executed many of his top generals, out of his paranoia. When these guys, someone like Kim Jong-un or a nation like Iran, another thing to remember, they don't perceive the world in the same terms that we do. We think of ourselves as being at peace with Iran and at being at peace with North Korea. They don't see themselves as being at peace with us. They think they're already at war with the United States. They see their own personal power and their nations and their ambitions as already under threat by the United States and their allies. So they see themselves locked in a desperate crisis, the way we were perceiving our own situation during the midst of World War II. What were we willing? The most benign nation that has ever existed, the most humanitarian nation that has ever existed, in the depths of World War II, in order to save our own people and to terminate that war, we were willing to drop atomic bombs on Japan. What would Kim Jong-un be willing to do? What would the mullahs in Iran be willing to do? We shouldn't be surprised. We shouldn't be surprised that if these most horrific and dysfunctional societies that have ever existed in human history tomorrow decided to attack us.
That's a very good point. One of the most humane, if not the most humane nation ever, very stable, very concerned about everybody, actually used nuclear weapons to stop evil, because we perceived evil as evil is, and taking that same paradigm, that intellectual paradigm, laying it over North Korea or Iran, they perceive us as evil, and we know Iran's geopolitical desires are to be the regional leader in the Middle East and extend its power from there. And we know, they know, we're in the way. That's why I want to discuss the scenario. We're going to let the guys ask you a couple of questions first. A scenario about Iran not wanting to mess with us at this point because of our capability, our divested capabilities, whether they're submarines or aircraft, to destroy their country completely. But maybe from Iran's point of view, particularly if President Obama is still the president, a strike against Israel will have the President Obama trying to calibrate down and mitigate down any kind of second response anywhere to not have this nuclear conflagration. Yet Iran gets to strike Israel. Israel throws a couple of back at them, destroys a third of their population. Israel's gone, Iran still lives, and maybe that's good nuclear calculus for Iran. Hold that for a second. Mark, you've been wanting to ask Peter Pry something.
Yes, let's say Kim Jong-il goes away to Caligula. All of Iran, Iraq, and everybody else becomes Christian. Everybody, world peace, everybody's screaming kumbaya. We still got a little problem here with the EMP, and it's this little big thing that's floating around the sky. And we do have a picture of the sun up there with a huge big fireball coming out of it, and that little bitty thing down the bottom, which looks like the little less than a thing. That's the Earth, okay? That's the fireball is so massively bigger than the Earth, it would blow away everything that we have. And this is a real threat. This has happened before, has it not, Peter Pry?
Yes, that's right. The most powerful nature can create an EMP2, a geomagnetic superstorm. They're rare, but they happen every century or so. The last most powerful one we know about was in 1859, called the Carrington Event. And during those horse and buggy days, civilization didn't depend upon electronics. But there were primitive electronic systems at the time that were millions of times harder to EMP than our very sophisticated electronic technology today, called the telegraph stations. You know, we had just laid the transatlantic cable in 1859, and the pulse from the EMP, the Carrington Event, basically created an electromagnetic pulse everywhere in the world. And it was so powerful, it reached down into the depths, miles deep into the Atlantic Ocean, and destroyed the transatlantic cable, and it had to be replaced. It caused fires in telegraph stations all over the world. Telegraph cables burst into flame and caused forest fires, all over the world. There was another geomagnetic superstorm, not as powerful as the Carrington Event, about 1/10 as powerful, that happened over the United States in 1921, called the Railroad Storm. Now, in 1921, we were still not really an electrified civilization. That didn't happen until the Roosevelt administration, when we, really went gung-ho and started electrifying everything. But the National Academy of Sciences did a study, and even if the 1921 Railroad Storm occurred, a storm 1/10 as powerful as Carrington, it would take at least 4 to 10 years for the United States to recover from the nationwide blackout. And as I noted earlier, a nationwide blackout lasting 1 year would kill 9 of 10 Americans. So whether we would even be able to recover from that. We were narrowly missed, according to a NASA report. NASA put out a report last July that in, I believe it was July 12th, 2012, a coronal mass ejection, such as you just had depicted earlier, a CME like that, crossed the path of the Earth and missed us by just 3 days.
Wow.
And had that hit us, it was a Carrington class coronal mass ejection. We would have buttoned the bullet right then, and we would have had the recurrence of a Carrington event back in 2012. But fortunately, God was on our side, and it missed us by 3 days. NASA estimates the likelihood, that this is inevitable. It's going to happen for sure. You can't deter it. The likelihood is 12% per decade, which virtually guarantees that within our lifetimes or that of our children, we will experience a natural EMP catastrophe. And you would prepare for that in the same way that you would prepare for a nuclear EMP attack. You would harden your grid. It's in a very similar phenomena to the nuclear EMP. If you're hardened against the nuclear EMP, it will also protect you against these non-nuclear this EMP from the sun. And we haven't talked about, there's another dimension to the EMP threat, which is the radio frequency weapons, non-nuclear EMP weapons. These kinds of weapons, the U.S. Air Force has just recently deployed one called CHAMP. They have a much shorter lethal radius than a nuclear weapon, and they're much less powerful than a nuclear weapon, but you could still black out an electric grid by flying CHAMP over the electric grid. Anyone can build these things using design information that's available on the internet and parts that you can buy for Radio Shack. When I was on the House Armed Services Committee, we did an experiment where we hired a guy who had a master's degree in electrical engineering and a couple of students, and we gave him a little money, and we gave him a year to see what he could do just using unclassified design information, coming up with radio frequency weapons, and he built 2 of them. One of them was designed to fit inside a Volkswagen bus, and the idea was you could drive this down Wall Street, and it would short out the computers on Wall Street and cause an economic crisis. The other one was disguised as a Xerox machine, and the idea here, this was before 9/11, you could mail this to the Pentagon. And back in those days, they didn't inspect the packages. And the idea was this would just sit in the Pentagon mailroom and fry the Pentagon computers.
All right, hang on 1 second, Peter. We have a little technical issue we have to sort out. 1 second, we were losing your audio. Starting to lose your audio, but I think we're okay. Are we okay now?
Yep.
Yeah, we are?
Yeah.
Now, this could also cause a catastrophic threat, because the U.S. Federal Energy Regulatory Commission did a study that found that if you attack just 9 key transformer substations, if you knew out of the 2,000 transformer substations in this country which 9 to attack, and you could figure that out by computer modeling, and actually just by some common sense, just by looking at where are the major metropolitan areas and stuff like that, you could use these non-nuclear radio frequency weapons, some of which can actually be purchased. There's a thing, in one of my books, I've got a picture of this thing called the Emp Suitcase, which is made in America. You don't need a license to buy it. It's not intended to be used as a weapon. It's a diagnostic tool that's intended to be used by industry. If you're designing floor space that's going to use heavy electronic equipment, you want to space the equipment far enough apart or build protective walls between the equipment so they don't fry each other out, because heavy electronic equipment puts out electromagnetic transients like EMPs. There it is. That this thing actually puts out, as you can see from the wave, 100,000 volts per meter over a short distance. So if one man can use that, you don't need a license to buy it, so you don't even need to be very smart. If you got your hands on one of those and you put it in the trunk of a car, you could back the car up to these transformer substations and fry out transformers, fry out SCADAs, and then go on to another substation and just keep going to the substations, burning things out, even at random, and eventually you're going to cause the grid to collapse. So, these are
this
the
is all
various
common knowledge.
threats.
This is all common knowledge on the internet, and it's shocking why people aren't doing more of this crazy stuff. Not that difficult, but a country having this capability, a country dedicated to death to America and Israel, is just mind-boggling. How do you harden the grid? I mean, take our studio, for example. We have a lot of sophisticated television equipment, cameras and lights and monitors and all of that, satellite feeds coming in for TV. How would we harden can we harden ourselves here, or is it something beyond a consumer?
No, individuals can do things to prepare their families. Communities can do things to prepare their communities for an EMP. States can harden their grids, and of course you can do it at a nationwide basis as well. In fact, I've been going because of Washington is so broken and dysfunctional, and even though we've had for years, we've been trying to pass bills in Washington to protect the national electric grid, and we're still trying. I have high hopes for a bill that's in front of Congress now called the Critical Infrastructure Protection Act. It passed the House last year unanimously. Everybody, Democrat and Republican, voted for it. So it's not like there's no support for this. Congress wants to do this. The problem is Washington is so broken. The founders never envisioned a situation where you would have these powerful lobbyists, like the electric power industry, the utilities, with very deep pockets. And all they have to do is buy one senator on a key committee, okay? And they can stop the bill from ever coming to a vote, and thereby neutralize the whole House of Representatives, because a single senator, can do that. They have the privilege of putting a bill on hold, and they don't even have to take responsibility. They can do it anonymously.
Why would they want to put the bill on hold?
Yeah, why would the guys who are exposed want to not fix their own problem?
Well, because they might be concerned about getting reelected, and they might like
the electrical companies. Why would they not want to harden their grids?
Why did the Zeppelin industry not want to use helium instead of hydrogen? Okay, back in the 1920s. Why did the Food and before there was a pure Food and Drug Administration? Why did Coca-Cola really put cocaine into Coca-Cola? Okay, why did the automobile industry have to have government regulations force them to put protective safety glass, bumpers that really work, and seat belts in automobiles? The reason is the invisible hand of Adam Smith is the best way of organizing an economy for providing goods and services to consumers at the lowest cost. And it is the best system ever devised by man for that purpose. Unfortunately, when it comes to national security, and the black swan events like an EMP attack, that's why we have government. The invisible hand of Adam Smith, when that merchant is thinking about, well, do I take this dollar of profit that I just made, and do I put that in my pocket, or do I invest that in, let's say, a surge arrestor to protect my EHV transformer from a nuclear EMP attack? He's going to say, and they are saying, that's the Department of Defense's job. That's the government's job, to keep people safe from those kinds of threats. I'm going to put that dollar in my pocket. And so part of it is the fact that they don't want to spend money, but it doesn't cost that much money. It would only cost $2 billion. The real reason behind it, where the electric power industry is concerned, is they're the last critical infrastructure that basically regulates themselves. They have even the U.S. Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, cannot order them to protect the grid against EMP. And they don't want to change that situation. They don't want a bill to pass that's going to empower any part of the U.S. government to have the power to tell them what they have to do, and then to inspect it. Right now, the U.S. FERC can't even go in and inspect things to make sure. And this, it's not just the EMP, by the way. They have not been very good even against run-of-the-mill kinds of threats, like falling tree branches. You may recall the Great Northeast Blackout of 2003. It was caused by a falling tree branch that hit a high-voltage line, and it caused cascading failures that put the whole Northeast into a temporary blackout and 50 million Americans were in the dark. People had to walk home because the subways wouldn't run in New York City. They had to walk home across the Brooklyn Bridge, okay? Well, you'd think that if the invisible hand of Adam Smith worked for national and homeland security type issues, that problem should have been fixed immediately. But NERC, that is the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, they belong to the electric.
Doctor, let's cut you off for 1 second because of the audio feedback here.
Yeah, we're getting feedback from you a little bit. You're, I don't know. I think somebody's got something out for your electrical system there.
And I have
but let me.
Can I ask one quick question?
Well, let me do a little station ID here. You're listening to Dr. Peter Pry. He is coming at us deep inside Mount Cheyenne Mountain. Actually, somewhere else on the East Coast, but I hope we have enough time. I want you to tell us about what's going on at Cheyenne Mountain these days. I live down in Denver and used to pass Cheyenne Mountain quite a bit down in the Springs. But WSBR Radio, Tom Trento, your host, Enemies of the State. We're discussing the electromagnetic pulse phenomenon, scientific phenomenon, and in the hands of the wrong people can be catastrophic to the United States. All week, apocalyptic Iran. Iran has been testing this technology, has been equipping themselves in this area. Just another threat on the horizon. Mark, you had a question for Dr. Pry.
Yeah, as far as the solution is concerned, real quick, is there's something as simple as what's called a Faraday cage. And it's basically the reason lightning does not hit you or strike you when you're in your car is because you're in a Faraday cage. And it's something as simple as putting a Faraday cage around these different substations and other places to actually harden the grid. That is the one simple solution. Am I not correct, Doctor?
There are other simple solutions that would be used in combinations with Faraday cages, which could be simple as putting a metal shed, that has no windows and that has a door that's designed so that it's electromagnetically sealed when the door is closed. It'd be very inexpensive to do that. You've got to shelter SCADA systems from the weather anyway, so why not do it with a simple Faraday cage? There are also surge arresters and blocking devices. The Department of Defense has known for 50 years how to protect its assets, and these could be applied to the electric grid. Another example of a Faraday cage is a metal garbage can with a tight-fitting lid.
Yeah.
If you have electronics at home that you want to protect, for example, some medical device or some kind of communications, if you put it in a plastic garbage bag and just put it so that it doesn't catch the sides of the garbage can, okay, and then put it in the garbage can and seal the lid so that you've got a good metal-to-metal contact there, just a tight-fitting lid. That'll do it. That would be a good Faraday cage. Fire departments and emergency medical teams could buy siphons. There are manual siphons that you can buy, all right, so that you can access gasoline, because gas stations won't work after an EMP because the pumps are run by electricity. But if you had a siphon, if you just spent $50 on a manual siphon, you could access the gasoline and use it for emergency workers, for fire departments, for the police, so that society wouldn't fall apart in the aftermath of an EMP, and you'd still have your transportation. You can harden your car against EMP for about $150. It's another myth is that you must buy a pre-1974 car, before they started installing electronic chips on the car. That's not true. If you get ferrite tubes, you can buy ferrite tubes. These are just plastic tubes that are they cut down electromagnetic transients. And if you had a mechanic, it would probably cost less than $100, to buy these tubes. And then it'd cost a little more. You'd have to pay for the labor for a mechanic, but I should think it could be done in a couple of hours, and have those tubes installed on the long wires in your car. Because the pulse, it can't directly couple into an electronic chip. It's got to couple into a wire. And so if you can keep the pulse from coupling into a wire in your car, you can harden your car very inexpensively. I've been trying to convince...
Dr. Pry, we're going to have to get going. This is fascinating. We're going to have you back to go through several scenarios. We want to take a look at a possible Iranian EMP attack on the United States, off the coast, or on Israel. Want to look at how that could happen. And then we want to look at day 1, day 2, week 1, week 2, month 1, month 2, after an EMP attack over an urban area somewhere in the world. So we want to get you back on the show, but we're out of time right now. Okay?
Too bad.
Great
Okay,
stuff, scary stuff, real stuff. We're bringing it to you, folks. Tom Trento signing off today. See you tomorrow, Wednesday. Take care. Have a wonderful, safe day.